Basically, I'm just going to talk about how my life has changed over the time that I've been working with Sisters of Frida, and how things have changed from being a student that lives at home and a student that's at university. So basically, when I first came to Sisters of Frida, I was still living at home, I was still in sixth form. And I think people at Sisters of Frida wanted me because I had sort of the perspective of a young person that was kind of missing in the group. And then from then on, I was still quite like, I didn't know much about feminist theory and I didn't know much about disabled theory and stuff like that. I still don't know anything, basically, but I just spoke about my life experiences and people seemed to like it, so I was like, okay, I'll keep doing this. And then when I went to university, I think Sisters of Frida was the first kind of experience I had being around other disabled people, because when I was younger, I used to kind of actively avoid people with disabilities because I didn't want to be seen as like disabled, so I just used to stay like with people who I thought were able-bodied, and some people who had like invisible disabilities, but people who I thought could pass as normal. So this was the first kind of experience I had being around other people with disabilities and other women with disabilities. But then when I went to university, I met a lot more disabled people and I kind of socialised a lot more with disabled people. And I think Sisters of Frida was a big part of the reason for that, because prior to coming to this organisation, I felt really uncomfortable being around people with disabilities, and I felt like I didn't want to be like clumped into one big group of disabled people or disabled women, and I kind of shied away from that label. But then after being at Sisters of Frida and then moving away for university, I was a lot more open to speaking to disabled people, and I joined my school's disability society, and I ran for the like disability mayor of all the disabled people in the university, I guess, and I won it. There wasn't much competition, it was like me and one other person, but still I won it. So yeah, I was happy about that. And then recently, what else have I done? I've done like nothing. Everyone has so much life experience and I've done like nothing at all. But what else did I was in Marie Claire for this thing. It was called like Break Free, and I was really happy about it, but then when it was published I was like, oh, this was not what I expected, because we had like a half-hour conversation about like what it's like to have a disability and what it's like being a university student with a disability and everything. And I said there were ups and downs, there were some good parts and there were some bad parts, but then from a 30-minute conversation she took like only the stuff that made me sound really tragic and miserable, and I was just like, oh, she just took everything like I said and twisted it to fit her own narrative, and I was really, really annoyed that she kind of wanted to pigeonhole. It was about breaking free from boundaries and restrictions, but she wanted to pigeonhole me into this box of like a tragic disabled person that I was just like, oh my god, spent so much time on the phone. I hate phone conversations, and I spent my time talking to you and you just twisted my words, and I was really upset about that. And like, I didn't even want to show my mom, but I did. I don't think she even read what was in the article. She was just really happy that my picture was in a magazine, so I was like, okay, you can look at it. But yeah, not to be negative, but that happened. What else have I done? And yeah, I've just been like, I've been having all kinds of difficulties as a student with a disability, but I've been trying to overcome them, and then I gave up on trying to overcome them, and now I'm going to a new school. So yeah, because accessibility was I didn't expect university to be this bad, but accessibility was really bad, like in terms of living and in terms of studying. Like when I got to university, they didn't even have a table for me, and I was like, I'm paying money to be here and you don't have a table, and they were like, well, we'll sort one out next week, and I was just like, that's not very good, you should do better. And aside from being at university and just struggling with everything, I think my life at home has improved a lot more now that I've started socialising with disabled people, because it's not necessarily that people have to have the same disability or the same health issues as you to understand you, but of course there is a shared like experience between people with disability that can sometimes lead to a relationship with more depth between people. So yeah, I think now that I've started socialising with disabled people, my life has improved a lot. And also I want to say, if you have any questions or you have anything to say, please tell me like now instead of later, because I don't just want to talk at you. I would rather have an actual conversation and not just be, you know, blabbering on. If anyone, yeah?
I was wondering what's like the most difficult aspect of university was, and what you think they need to change.
The most
attitude, is it the lack of adjustment, is it the finances, what is it that's really?
The most difficult, all aspects are difficult aspects. I think the thing that surprised me is the aspect that I was most worried about, like the domestic cooking and cleaning and everything, was actually the least difficult. Like I struggled the least with that, but in terms of things like getting around and just having enough time and also socialising, because I think at university in London it's quite like an inclusive bubble and there's all kinds of races and all different mixes of people. But at university there's a lot of like students from really small towns where everyone's white and everyone's like assumingly able-bodied, and then there's a lot of people from abroad as well where they don't have many people with disabilities that are out in public. So I think a lot of people, like, it was their first time seeing a black person, and then it was also their first time seeing someone in a wheelchair, so they would just see me and they'd be like, whoa, and I would just be like, oh, this is such an awkward experience to be like, for someone who's used to dealing with awkward experiences, it was really like, oh, it was awful. But obviously that's not their fault. They haven't been exposed to like different kinds of people, and they're ignorant, but it's not by choice, so I don't hold it against them. But aside from that, I think socializing is really difficult, because I think people don't want to kind of pressurize you. Like at university, there's people that hand out flyers to go to clubs and stuff, and they would hand them out to everyone, but then as soon as they saw me, they would just be like, oh, no thanks. And I would be like, well, I don't want your flyer, but I still want to socialize. And I think people didn't know what was appropriate, like if they were going to drag me out of the house, or if they should just leave me to fester alone. And I think because where I lived was really inaccessible as well, there was 4 flights and there was no lift, and I lived on the ground floor, and everyone would go upstairs to party and I would just be stuck there, and yeah, it made it really difficult to be social. And I think that was one of the hardest parts as well, because obviously I didn't know anyone there and I didn't want to just be on my own all the time. But yeah.
Where have you studied?
I was studying at Birmingham, and now I'm going to Nottingham because I heard it's a lot better and a lot more accessible.
In terms of like within the department, what was the attitude? Were they willing to make adjustments, or did they see it as inconvenience?
They were like so crap. They were really so bad. They said that they would make adjustments and they said that they would make changes, but they didn't actually do anything. And I think they expected me to kind of pressurize them to make changes. But as someone who's just left home for the first time, I'm having to cook, I'm having to clean, I'm having to study and everything. I didn't have time for all of that stuff, so I just kind of let them be crap about what they were going to be crap about, because I didn't really have time to argue with them or fight back repeatedly, so I just kind of gave up on that.
What were the disability services like?
They were crap too. They didn't really. No, they weren't very good at all. And I complained to them a lot because my accommodation was really expensive, but that was the only accessible accommodation. So I was like, is it possible for me to get a discount or anything? Because I have no choice but to live here. They just ignored me. Everything I asked for, they just like ignored me. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna save my complaints for someone who cares. My mom. But yeah, so it wasn't very good.
Yeah, Becky, can I ask you about the kind of socialising side of it? Because obviously you've talked, I've heard you talk to us now about all kinds of things, but I'm really interested in how is the social interaction? Do you think you've been able to make friends and have relationships and go out and do things that other people have, or are you still feeling that it's a bit, they're over here and I'm over here?
I have actually been able to socialise, but I think the thing that was so different was that I went from sixth form where there was 200 people and there was a mix of races and a mix of people with disabilities and able-bodied people. And I think at sixth form, after like 2 months, you know everyone, but at university you meet new people every single day. So you have to go through that process of them staring, them being curious, them asking questions every single day. Whereas after a while at sixth form, everyone knows everyone and you're just viewed as normal. So I think it was very difficult, like going through that same kind of rigorous process over and over again. But I did actually end up making friends with people, and I think the more people I made friends with and the more I went out, the more people recognized me, so they weren't so like standoffish or curious in a strange way. So it was very difficult and it took longer than I would have expected, but I did end up making a few friends.
When you were at school, it wasn't really included in the same way your non-disabled peers were. Did that have some kind of impact?
Yeah, definitely. As well as the fact that like a lot of people in my school used to bully me for having a disability, I wouldn't want to make myself kind of more visible by hanging out with other people that had disabilities. Now that I look back on it, that might have been better for me because safety in numbers, but I thought, you know, I'm just going to isolate myself from all of these people. Not that there were many people with disabilities at my school anyway, but I thought I'm going to isolate myself from the few people that are there in order to like protect myself. But now I feel like, because I feel more assertive, I don't have to do that, because I can defend myself and I have the right to befriend whoever I want to befriend.
I went to special school and then I went on to university, the only blind art student in the country in the 70s, and I had exactly your experience as a kind of like a little perfect, you know, a lot of isolation, a lot of kind of like not knowing when things were happening, and then eventually getting some good close friends, and being okay. But actually I managed to manage it, unfortunately, by drinking a lot of alcohol, which is a really bad idea. But that was my kind of stress pattern coming out, and then sleeping with a lot of people I really shouldn't have slept with, because I thought that was love, and I wanted to be good, and actually they were just taking advantage of me, bastards. But sometimes that happens. We come out of school situations. That's something we come into university, we may be the only person there, and end up in kind of like some quite difficult situations, and it's very tough because nobody warns you that's going to happen, and nobody kind of gives you the support to kind of like to get out of the mess you get into either. Because I just took it as, oh well, that's them loving me or whatever it is, or I'm part of the gang, when actually I wasn't. I was just being used.
I definitely agree with the no one giving you support, because I think going from sixth form, when I was at sixth form, my teachers were very involved in my life, like educationally and personal. Like they would always ask, how are you, how's everyone? But at university, no one even knows your name. Like if you went missing, no one would know. You could be dead for ages and no one would even realize. So it can be quite isolating, because aside from your peers not caring for you, your parents, your family aren't there, and your teachers, who kind of become a second family to you when you're at primary and secondary school, don't care about you. So you're just kind of completely lost, especially if you move to a new city. You're kind of completely lost, and I think for people with disabilities, you're even more vulnerable, because you might find it hard to communicate to others how you're feeling. So yeah, I think university can actually be really crap, but it can also be really good. I did end up making a lot of really good close friends that understood me. I think part of that was because they were my flatmates, so we just kind of had to get along, and now they've become my good friends. But I know some people don't have that opportunity, and they can kind of drift through university without any proper support, which is why people should go to Disability Society meetings.
What makes it better?
I think there's a lot of people at university that have disabilities that don't identify as disabled and don't want to be seen as disabled, so they won't go to society meetings, they won't reach out for help. So I think something that would make it better would be to kind of make disability societies more open to it, because at my university you have to really look for them, they're not really advertised or publicised. I think if disability societies were more kind of well known at universities, more people would come forward, and I think more people would see that having a disability isn't just not being able to walk or to hear or to see. There are some disabilities that affect you mentally, not necessarily physically, and there's a whole spectrum of things. And there are people out there that are like you, because you often feel quite isolated, especially if you're just seeing people from a distance. You don't know what their lives are like, so you're going to assume that their life is perfect, they have a ton of friends, they're doing great, but you don't understand that someone might be going through the same thing that you're going through, and you'll never know unless you try and socialise with people and you reach out to people. So I think universities should make more effort to bring students together. Yes?
Yeah, I was curious about because I attend sort of University of Manchester, which is I suppose quite good in terms of disability support. And I've really noticed sort of like a difference in terms of different universities, how they offer disability support and all kinds of support. One of the things that I've noticed, so was for a while also actually in the staff network, is about like that most support is for people with learning difficulties, but like for other people with like other disabilities, there's not a lot of people, it seems.
Yeah, I was actually going to go to Manchester, but I went to the campus and I was like, it's too spread out, so I'm not going to be able to get around. I decided to go to Birmingham instead. I shouldn't have done that. But yeah, I think in terms of like varying levels of support, I think at universities there is an assumption that the most important aspect of university is getting along academically, and I feel like they believe that someone who has a physical disability and has no sort of learning disability shouldn't need that much support aside from being given an accessible room with an accessible classroom, because they've already made it to university, so I'm sure they'll be fine for the next 3 years. Whereas they're aware of the fact that for people with learning disabilities, there's going to be a new level of education, and there's going to be a new level of like experience that people are going to need to get through university, so they're kind of more supportive of them and their growth, but they feel as though like if there's a student in a wheelchair and...
Yeah, I don't think that, I'll be honest, I don't think that's the only reason. I think there's just not enough expertise.
Yes,
expertise
I agree, yeah.
I don't know, but my experience is at some point, okay, this is really not helpful, great, and but
yeah.
You know. I was also wondering, like, how did you choose then Nottingham, like, why? Is it like, okay, I hope it's better?
I think the thing that you said about expertise is right, because when I was at my university, I did ask, is there anyone on the disability team that actually has a disability, has personal experience with this that I can speak to? And they were just like, no. And I was like, all right, that's great, thank you. And I had to just move on with my life. But yeah, I think there would be a huge difference if people that worked with disabled people in university were actually disabled themselves, because they're giving first-hand advice. And I chose Nottingham basically because of Eleanor, because I did ask, I was thinking I'm going to go to a different university, so I asked her, like, where do you think is good for wheelchair services and disability services, and she said that she's heard good things about Nottingham. So she put me into contact with a girl that actually went to Nottingham who's a wheelchair user. She told me it was good, and then I went to visit, and then they met like they brought me to another girl in a wheelchair that was actually there at the time, and she was like, yeah, Nottingham's great, and I was like, okay, Nottingham it is. So yeah, I'm moving next month.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I didn't put a lot of thought into the decision, but.
Do we have any other questions or comments?
Yeah, in terms, because you obviously there are obvious reasons why you would continue finishing your course, but for you, what were those motivating factors of saying this is definitely worth it, and it's definitely worth, like, obviously those obstacles shouldn't be there, but it's worth overcoming them?
Well, basically, I dropped out of school when I was 16 in my first year of sixth form because I was like really, really depressed, because I went to secondary school and people like bullied me for the whole 5 years, and I thought, I went to the sixth form at the same school, so it was the same people, but I just assumed that all the people that bullied me would not have passed their exams and would drop out, and I was right, they didn't pass their exams and drop out, they did drop out, but people still weren't very friendly to me, so I was really disappointed with the experience, and I was like, so depressed, and I had such bad anxiety at the time, so I just left school. But then I decided that I was going to go back, and I really put like 100% of my effort into doing A-levels, and I really like just focused and put all my heart into it. And then I got to university and it was awful, and I was like, well, I spent 2 years of my life really working hard to get to this place, so I'm not just going to give up, because I know that later, if I gave up now, I would want to go back later, and then that would start a whole new thing of having to reapply and do it. So I was like, I'm just going to force myself to find a way to get through this. And I was thinking of staying at Birmingham, but now I was like, no, this is ridiculous. I should go somewhere else and have a horrible time there, but it will be accessible. So then I thought, yeah, go on. So then I thought, like, I'll find somewhere else. And I thought about changing my course, but then I was like, no, I'm going to have to do a whole other year of university. So I just thought, I'm going to go to Nottingham and I'm just going to tough it out. And hopefully it will be okay.
What's your course?
Psychology. Yeah. It's okay. Good.
I was going to ask you whether the student union got any help with you in learning. And also, did you give Birmingham any feedback about why you were planning to?
The student union didn't even have like electric doors, so I had to like shove myself at the door every time I wanted to get in, and no one would ever help me. So that's how the student union is in a sentence. But yeah, they weren't really, well, to be fair, they didn't really have much money, so they were having their own kind of struggles. I couldn't really blame them, but they didn't really care. I think the student union only cared about societies and clubs and sports and organising nights out. They didn't really care about the individual welfare of the students. So, yeah. Making the Birmingham sound horrible, but this is the truth. And yeah, I didn't really tell them anything, I just told them I'm leaving, and I left. Because I don't think they would have listened anyway. I did share with the Disability Society like how I was feeling. I shared with my other students and my flatmates, but as for the actual staff, I was just like, oh. Yeah. Do you have a...
So how did you get through then? I mean, what sort of kept you sort of like, kept you strong and to get through, because you said you were depressed, and how did you get through all of that?
I had really good friends. I had one really good friend, my flatmate, and then she moved at the end of the year, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do? But she was really, really nice. She was great and super supportive, and she's like a best friend to me now. And as well as that, a lot of my friends from home visited me at university, and I traveled at home a lot, and I started doing like sport, like I started playing tennis and I started swimming, and I joined the drama society, and I was in like a couple of plays, and I did some volunteer work, and I did tutoring, and that was basically what I did, like, to stop myself from feeling miserable, because if I didn't do any of those activities, I would have just sat at home and like watched other people going out and felt bad. So I just decided to put all of my time that I couldn't put into partying or socializing into helping other people and doing things to better myself.
Please thank Becky.